Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take your reading list, the sources you send us, and really distill them down.
Yeah, we extract those crucial insights. Think of it as your fast track to getting properly informed on, well, complex topics.
And today, wow, we're plunging into something that's both deep history and incredibly current, isn't it?
Absolutely. Thanks to the sources you shared, our mission today is to really unpack the Luddite movement. Where did it come from? What was its story?
And crucially, why is it suddenly everywhere again?
Oh,
Especially with all the talk about artificial intelligence and, well, jobs.
exactly. The potential impact of AI on how we all work.
So, to sort of get our bearings, let's rewind. Way back. Early hours, April 12th, 1812.
Okay.
Picture West Yorkshire. Rugged moors, the kind of landscape that inspired the Bronte sisters later on.
Right. Evocative.
And under the cover of darkness, there's this group of men, armed men, moving towards Rawfold's Mill.
It's a big stone building, right?
Right.
By a river.
That's the one. 4 stories, stone, beside the river spin. And they're carrying, well, an arsenal. Muskets, heavy sticks, even blacksmith hammers.
Not exactly a friendly visit, then.
Definitely not. And this dramatic scene, this is really our way into understanding the Luddites.
So let's start there. What actually was the Luddite movement at its core?
Well, fundamentally, it was this wave of protests, often violent attacks on factories.
And this was happening in the textile regions, central and northern England.
Yeah, places like Nottinghamshire, Lancashire, Yorkshire. It really kicked off around 1811, 1812.
And these attacks, they weren't just random smashing, were they?
No, not at all. They specifically targeted the new machines. Things like knitting frames, wool processing machines, gig mills, shearing frames, that kind of thing.
Machines that might seem, well, pretty old-fashioned to us now.
Right. But back then, for the skilled workers, the stocking knitters, the croppers, these things were a direct threat, a huge threat.
Because these weren't just unskilled laborers. These were artisans, highly skilled people.
Exactly. Many had spent years mastering their craft. Skills passed down generation after generation.
Like the shearers, you mentioned the croppers. They had these really intricate ways of finishing wool cloth with hand shears, almost like a kind of artisanal priesthood, as one source put it.
That's a great phrase for it. And they saw these machines as just destroying everything, their wages, their skills, the whole way their communities worked.
And that attack on Rawfold's Mill you mentioned earlier, that really highlights the conflict, doesn't it?
It does, tragically. The owner, William Cartwright, he'd actually expected trouble, fortified the mill.
So he was ready for them.
He was. When the Luddites attacked, his men, plus some soldiers, fought back, even dropped rocks from the roof.
Wow. Intense.
And the outcome? 2 attackers, young men, mortally wounded, died soon after.
And the official verdict.
Justifiable homicide, that's the coroner said. It really shows the desperation on both sides, I think.
And the government's response, how did they handle this?
Swift, decisive, and clearly siding with the factory owners, the industrialists.
They brought in new laws.
Yes, the Frame-Breaking Act made destroying these machines a capital offense, punishable by death.
By death, just for breaking a machine.
That's right. And the trials at York Castle in early 1813, 14 men, mostly croppers, were convicted, rioting, machine breaking.
And the sentence.
All 14 were hanged. An observer at the time even doubted they fully understood the crime they were being executed for. It was extreme.
It really shows where the power lay and what the priorities were. Industrial progress over worker welfare.
Definitely. And the name itself, Luddite. Where did that even come from? It's a bit mysterious.
Yeah, the sources point to a couple of possibilities. Maybe a worker named Ned Ludd, who supposedly smashed a frame way back in 1779.
Or maybe connected to an old Anglo-Saxon king, Luddites. Seems less likely, but it's mentioned.
Regardless, this figure, General Ludd, emerged. More of a symbol, a figurehead, than a real person, probably.
Right, like that letter sent after another mill owner, William Horsfall, was assassinated. Signed by order of General Ludd.
Chilling. It is. But it's so important to grasp, and the sources emphasize this. They weren't just anti-technology for its own sake.
No, it was a reaction. A specific reaction to how technology was being used against them.
Against their livelihoods, their skills. Within this new system, industrial capitalism, their aim was almost conservative in a way, trying to protect their established way of life.
And you have to remember, these workers, they had basically no political voice, no vote, no say in parliament.
So when peaceful means failed,
Violence felt like the only option left. There's that quote from a Yorkshire cropper, something like, "Starvation forces nature to do that which he would not."
Powerful. It speaks to sheer desperation. They felt pushed right to the edge.
So, okay, that's the what. What about the why? What were the bigger forces behind this eruption?
Well, it's all tied up with the rise of industrial capitalism,
Yeah.
the factory system.
These huge new mills, like Murray's Mills in Manchester.
Yeah.
Hundreds and hundreds of workers all in one place. A totally new scale.
Exactly. That was the visible symbol of this massive economic and social shift.
And the technology itself, especially in cotton manufacturing, was changing so fast.
Right. Spinning got mechanized fairly early. But weaving, that took longer. It relied on skilled handloom weavers for quite a while.
And ironically, that actually created a bit of a boom for them initially, didn't it? More spun yarn meant more work for weavers.
For a time, yes, their incomes even went up. But it was short-lived.
Because then came the power loom, Edmund Cartwright's invention from 1785.
It took a while to catch on, faced resistance, technical issues.
Yeah.
But by the early 1800s, it was becoming more efficient, more widely adopted.
And that, combined with the Napoleonic Wars hitting demand for textiles.
Devastating for the handloom weavers. Their income just plummeted, dropped by over 40% between 1804 and 1810 alone.
40% in 6 years. You can imagine the shock, the insecurity for those families.
Absolutely. And initially, they did try peaceful rights, even though unions were illegal.
They organized that huge petition to Parliament asking for a minimum wage.
Yeah, reportedly 130,000 signatures. But Parliament just rejected it flat out in 1808.
Which must have felt like a slap in the face, left them feeling even more powerless.
And that rejection, well, it seemed to pave the way for more unrest. Strikes, riots. Things started escalating in Lancashire.
And as the authorities cracked down, arrested people, brought in the military.
So resistance got more organized and, unfortunately, more violent. That's when you see things like factory burnings, Stockport, a mill with power looms set on fire.
Attacks on mills like the one in Middleton where people were killed on both sides. More military clashes. It just spiraled.
And we need to remember the context, too. This wasn't happening in isolation.
Right. There was the wartime depression, cost of living soaring, food riots were common.
Mill owners started getting threatening letters, signed General Justice. It showed how widespread the anger and sense of injustice really was.
But what happened to the movement in the end? Did they succeed?
Well, not really. Faced with the full power of the state, the military, the movement kind of faded out by about 1815.
But the problems didn't go away.
Far from it. For artisans like the handloom weavers, things got even worse long term. Wages just collapsed down by something like 80% by 1830.
80%. That's unbelievable.
It led to mass poverty, terrible hardship. There's that heartbreaking story in one source about an entire weaving family literally starving to death over time. It shows the human cost.
Which brings us to the lasting significance of Luddism, doesn't it? It really forced this social question into the open.
Exactly. Questioning the fairness, the legitimacy of an economic system that could just discard workers like that, leave them so vulnerable to market forces.
Like the historian E.P. Thompson argued, they weren't just anti-machine. They were protesting the rules of the game. The capitalists' freedom, as he put it, to destroy traditional ways of working with new machines, the factory system, wage cuts.
Precisely. They were pushing back against this new free market thinking, laissez-faire, which basically said employers should have free rein and government should keep out.
And the Luddites saw that not as progress, but as, what was the phrase? A foul imposition.
Yeah. They felt it ignored fairness, community, the old ideas of mutual obligation that existed even under earlier systems.
Okay, so fast forward almost 2 centuries. Suddenly, people are talking about the Luddites again. A lot. Why now?
Well, the big driver seems to be the huge global buzz and maybe anxiety around artificial intelligence, AI.
Suddenly their story feels relevant again.
Yeah.
Eerily so.
It seems that way. You see podcasts popping up like the Ned Ludd Radio Hour, taking a skeptical look at tech, or This Machine Kills, focusing on AI's role in, well, disciplining labor.
And Brian Merchant's book, Ludd and the Machine. That draws a direct line, doesn't it? From the original Luddites to today's automation pushed by big tech.
It really does. Merchant basically argues that working people today are facing a very similar challenge. Labor-saving tech, AI, robotics. It feels like history repeating, in a way.
And the warnings about AI's impact on jobs are getting louder, coming from some serious sources.
Oh, yeah. McKinsey estimated generative AI could automate tasks taking up 60 to 70% of employees' time. 70%.
And Goldman Sachs put a number on it, the equivalent of 300 million full-time jobs globally at risk from generative AI.
300 million, it's staggering. And it's hitting fields we didn't expect, like computer programming. AI is getting surprisingly good at coding.
Which is quite a shift from, say, 10 years ago, right? The prevailing view then was more optimistic.
Generally, yes. The dominant economic thinking was that AI, like earlier tech breakthroughs, would ultimately boost productivity, raise living standards overall, the second machine age perspective, comparing AI to the steam engine.
But generative AI seems to have shaken that confidence a bit, even among the optimists.
It has. Eric Brynjolfsson, one of the second machine age authors, wrote last year about using ChatGPT for his own research, building models, writing code, getting titles, all in one morning.
Shows the incredible potential for speeding things up, right? Across many fields.
Definitely huge potential benefits. But even Brynjolfsson and others admit a bigger economic pie doesn't automatically mean everyone gets a fair slice.
Ah, the distribution problem.
Exactly. And economists like Darren Acemoglu are raising more urgent warnings now, saying, look, if AI is developed mostly for automation, for replacing workers, rather than augmenting them.
Helping them do their jobs better.
Right. If it's just about replacement, Acemoglu warns, the societal consequences could be really negative. More inequality, maybe even threats to democracy itself.
It really does echo the Luddites, doesn't it? They saw mechanization as a threat to their specific skilled work. Now we're asking similar questions about AI across a much wider range of jobs.
It feels like the same fundamental tension playing out again, just on a much larger, faster scale.
So when we look at what AI might bring, the sources paint a mixed picture, right? Positives and negatives.
Very mixed. On the plus side, yes, huge potential for productivity growth. Accelerating science, engineering, medicine. David Otter highlights the opportunities in research, boosting productivity generally.
He also mentioned potential in healthcare, education, law.
Right. Using AI to augment professionals. Think AI helping nurse practitioners, making education or legal advice more accessible, cheaper. Supporting human expertise.
Okay, that sounds good. But then there's the other side of the coin.
The darker side, yes. The risk of mass job displacement we talked about, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, the potential erosion of human skills if we rely too much on AI.
And more inequality. Wealth and power getting even more concentrated in a few tech giants.
That's a major concern. Brynjolfsson calls it the Turing Trap. Acemoglu warns about creating a two-tier society, over-centralizing information, maybe even discouraging human curiosity and critical thinking.
And Otter also worried that AI development is too focused on narrow tasks, rather than real-world human augmentation.
Yes, he cited studies where AI actually made human experts, like radiologists, perform worse, because the AI wasn't designed well for collaboration. It wasn't really helping them, just adding noise or confusion.
Okay, so that leads to the really big question, the one probably on everyone's mind. Can we actually do anything to avoid mass unemployment? To steer this in a better direction?
Well, people are definitely thinking about it. Eric Brynjolfsson floated the idea of changing the tax system.
How so?
Basically, making it less attractive financially to just replace workers with machines. Maybe taxing capital income more like we tax labor income through payroll taxes, to incentivize developing AI that helps workers, that augments them.
Interesting. Shifting the incentives.
And Acemoglu and Otter argue for a much broader approach, really actively shaping how AI gets developed and deployed.
Otter specifically talks about designing AI as tools for humans,
Okay.
not replacements.
Exactly. He says we need to consciously design for that world, a world of human-AI collaboration.
How would we do that in practice?
He suggests things like government playing a role, rigorous testing of AI in real-world settings, evaluating the social impact before widespread rollout.
Not just letting companies release it and see what happens.
Right, and focusing development on AI that empowers workers, maybe even those without advanced degrees, to do more complex, higher-value tasks.
Spreading the benefits more widely.
Potentially. He even suggested governments could use their buying power in healthcare, education, to demand responsible AI development and testing as a condition of funding.
But he admitted that's tough, didn't he? Since so much AI funding is private.
Yeah, that's the challenge. Private companies are driving a lot of this, and their goals might not always align perfectly with, say, maximizing societal well-being or equity.
It kind of reminds me of that Lord Byron speech back in 1812, warning Parliament not just to punish the Luddites, but to address the reasons for their distress, the impact of the technology.
It's a direct parallel. And the scary thing now is the speed. The Industrial Revolution unfolded over decades, generations. AI is moving so much faster.
Less time for society, for policymakers to adapt. We could see huge displacement truck drivers, taxi drivers with self-driving tech happening relatively quickly.
Which leads to these wildly different potential futures being discussed. You have, say, the Trump administration focusing on job security, skeptical of automation's benefits.
Versus someone like Elon Musk predicting jobs will become obsolete and will need something like universal basic income.
Exactly. Two very different visions, potentially clashing. And then you have AI pioneers like Jeffrey Hinton recently suggesting socialism might be needed as a response.
Which, again, echoes history socialist ideas, social safety nets emerging in response to the Industrial Revolution's disruption.
It does, although David Otter, he sounded quite pessimistic in one piece. Less confident in our current ability to manage this transition compared to past eras. He called it a bad moment for AI to appear.
Wow, a bad moment. That's sobering.
It highlights the scale of the challenge, the political divisions, the uncertainty we're facing.
So wrapping this up, it feels like the core connection is clear. The Luddites, then, AI concerns now. It's this fundamental tension, isn't it, between technological progress, its impact on work, and the anxiety that creates in society.
Absolutely. It's a story that keeps repeating.
And it leaves us, and you listening, with a really big thought, I think. Are our current ways of doing things, our economic systems, our political will, actually up to the task of navigating this AI revolution?
Can we manage it so the benefits are shared widely? Can we avoid the mistakes, the suffering that happened during past transformations?
Can we learn from history, from the Luddites even, to build a technological future that's, well, more equitable?
That's the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one we'll all be grappling with for years to come.